You step into an elevator. A stranger steps in behind you. Nobody says anything. Nobody looks at anybody. But something in your chest tightens just slightly, and you find yourself staring at the floor numbers like they're the most interesting thing you've ever seen. You tell yourself it's nothing, just a weird social habit, just modern awkwardness. But the real answer is far stranger. That tightness in your chest isn't awkwardness. It's an alarm system, one that is roughly 200,000 years old, and it has no idea it's standing in an elevator. For almost the entire history of your species, you never met a stranger and lived to tell a neutral story about it. Strangers were not small talk. Strangers were a decision point. Feed them, fight them, or flee them. There was no fourth option where you simply rode an elevator together in silence, both staring at your phones. The anthropologist Robin Dunbar spent decades studying how large a human social group can actually get before it collapses under its own weight. His answer, now famous as Dunbar's number, lands around 150 people. That's the ceiling on how many faces your brain evolved to hold as known, trusted, mapped, and safe. 150. Think about how many faces you pass in a single day now. A subway platform alone can blow past that number before you've finished your coffee. A single scroll through a crowded feed can blow past it before you've finished breakfast. Here's the part that should stop you cold. Your brain was never upgraded for this. The hardware built to track 150 familiar faces in a small hunting band is the exact same hardware trying to process a city of 9 million strangers. It did not get a bigger processor. It got asked to run a much bigger program on the same old chip. So what does it do when it can't recognize a face? It defaults to threat. Not because you're paranoid, because unrecognized meant unpredictable. And for most of human history, unpredictable got people killed. Somewhere behind your eyes, tucked deep in the temporal lobe, sits a small almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. The neuroscientist Joseph LeDoux spent much of his career mapping exactly what this structure does, and one of his central findings changed how we understand fear. The amygdala doesn't wait for your conscious mind to weigh in. It fires first. It decides a face might be dangerous in milliseconds, long before the thinking part of your brain has even finished loading the picture. That's the tightness in your chest in the elevator. That's not you being weird. That's an ancient guard, standing post, doing exactly the job it was built for, on a stranger who almost certainly just wants to get to the 4th floor. But there's a second layer to this, and it's even stranger than the first. It isn't only that strangers are unpredictable. It's that your brain sorts people into categories before you've even decided to think about them at all. In the 1970s, the social psychologist Henri Tajfel ran an experiment that still unsettles people today. He took a group of teenage boys who had no prior relationship with each other and split them into 2 groups using something as meaningless as a coin flip. No shared history, no shared beliefs, no shared anything really, except a label. Within minutes, the boys started favoring their own group. They gave better rewards to boys in their own label, even when it cost them nothing to be fair, even when the label meant absolutely nothing outside of that room. Tajfel called this the minimal group paradigm, and what it revealed was uncomfortable. Your brain doesn't need a real reason to divide people into us and them. It just needs a label, a team jersey, a different accent, a different way of standing in line, anything at all. Now stretch that discomfort back across your evolutionary history. For a hunter-gatherer, the them wasn't an abstraction. The them might raid your camp. The them might compete for the same water source, the same grazing land, the same shrinking patch of forest. Groups that hesitated to sort friend from stranger, ally from threat, didn't get a participation trophy for open-mindedness. They got outcompeted, sometimes violently, by groups that made that call fast. So your brain learned to make it fast. Faster than fair, faster than accurate, fast enough to keep the group alive. That's the second alarm going off in the elevator. Not just unfamiliar face, but unfamiliar face, unknown label, unknown group. Two ancient systems, stacked on top of each other, screaming quietly at a man in a gray sweater who was thinking about lunch. It goes back even further than childhood habits. It goes back to infancy itself. Developmental researchers have long documented something called stranger anxiety, a phase where a baby who has been perfectly content in anyone's arms suddenly begins crying the moment an unfamiliar face leans in close. It usually shows up around 8 or 9 months old, right when a baby has just learned to tell familiar faces apart from unfamiliar ones. That's not a coincidence. That's a switch flipping on schedule right when it becomes useful. Before 8 months, an infant can't distinguish caregiver from stranger well enough for the fear to matter. The moment that skill arrives, the fear arrives with it, like the two were always meant to travel together. You weren't taught to be wary of unfamiliar faces. You were born with the wiring already halfway installed, waiting for your brain to finish the blueprint. Here's where it gets almost funny, if it wasn't so exhausting. Your body has a chemical specifically designed to turn strangers into trusted allies. Oxytocin, sometimes nicknamed the bonding hormone, floods your system during moments of closeness, touch, shared vulnerability, cooperative effort. It's the chemical glue behind parent and child, behind old friends, behind teammates who've bled together on a field. But oxytocin isn't handed out freely to just anyone standing near you. It's earned through repetition, shared context, time. A stranger hasn't logged any of those hours yet, so the chemical door to trust simply hasn't opened. You're standing next to someone your body has decided, correctly by its own ancient math, not to release the good chemicals for. No wonder the silence feels loud. Modern life didn't design itself around any of this. Cities, subways, open-plan offices, crowded airports, none of these existed when your nervous system was being built. You were built for campfires and small bands and knowing by sight and smell and voice exactly who belonged. Instead, you got skyscrapers full of thousands of people you will never learn the names of. And here's the twist nobody warns you about. The same crowding that should, in theory, make you feel constantly surrounded by allies often makes you feel the opposite. Researchers studying urban life have repeatedly found that people report feeling lonelier in dense cities than in small towns, even though they are physically closer to more human beings than at any point in history. More faces, less recognition. Your brain isn't counting bodies. It's counting bonds. And bonds take time your busy, anonymous, big city life rarely gives them the chance to build. So you can be surrounded and still feel like you're standing completely alone in that elevator. Here's a strange twist, though. This same system that makes you wary of strangers is also remarkably easy to override, on purpose. Researchers studying cooperation have found that even the smallest shared signal, a shared team, a shared hometown, a shared joke, can flip that ancient us versus them switch almost instantly. The same brain that sorts a stranger as a threat in the elevator will sort that exact same stranger as an ally the moment you discover you both grew up 3 streets apart, or both hate the same coworker, or both got soaked in the same freak rainstorm outside. You are not permanently wired against strangers. You are wired to look for the fastest possible reason to stop treating someone as one. That's why eye contact on a hiking trail feels completely different from eye contact on a crowded street. Context tells your amygdala something. A hiking trail whispers shared purpose, shared risk, shared reason for being there. A crowded street whispers nothing. No shared label, no shared story. Just faces, unlabeled, unsorted, and therefore, by 200,000 years of programming, mildly suspicious by default. It's why a smile from a stranger on an airplane feels warmer than the exact same smile from a stranger in a parking garage. Same muscles, same teeth, completely different context, and your amygdala reads context like it's the only language it speaks. It's why a single sentence spoken in the right moment can dissolve years of instinctive wariness. Ask 2 strangers stuck in the same delayed flight to talk for 10 minutes, and something shifts. Shared circumstance quietly overrides ancient suspicion. The label changes from stranger to fellow traveler, and the whole nervous system recalculates accordingly, without you ever consciously deciding to trust them. Humans figured this out long before any psychologist put a name to it. Think about the handshake. Historians tracing its origins point to a simple, practical function. An open palm proved you weren't holding a weapon. A firm grip, held for a beat, gave both people a moment to check for a hidden blade tucked in a sleeve. It wasn't politeness first. It was a threat assessment dressed up as a greeting. Breaking bread together carries the same hidden logic. Sharing food with someone meant you weren't planning to poison them, and you were vulnerable enough, distracted enough, to trust them not to attack while your hands were full. Every culture on Earth developed some version of this ritual, independently, over and over, because the underlying problem was universal. How do you get a nervous system built for suspicion to stand down long enough to cooperate? The answer was never logic. It was ritual. Small, repeatable actions that gave the ancient alarm system enough evidence to relax, even for a moment. Modern life stripped most of these rituals away and replaced them with something far colder. A dating app profile, a customer service chat window, a name tag on a lanyard. These are supposed to do the same job the handshake once did, but they carry almost none of the sensory evidence your amygdala actually wants. No open palm, no shared meal, no slow, physical proof of safety. Just text on a screen asking your 200,000-year-old alarm system to trust a stranger based on a profile photo and a bio. No wonder so much of modern communication feels exhausting in a way older generations struggled to explain. You're not just talking to more strangers than any human in history ever has. You're doing it with almost none of the ancient tools your body actually evolved to use for the job. So the next time you catch yourself staring at elevator numbers instead of making conversation or crossing the street slightly wider around someone you don't know, understand what's actually happening underneath it. You are not socially broken. You are not overly anxious. You are running software built for bands of 150 in a world that handed you cities of millions. And somehow, most days, you're still managing to be kind to strangers anyway. That's not a flaw in the design. That's you quietly outthinking 200,000 years of instinct, one elevator ride at a time.